The sound of a single hand. The Zen story of Kaito and inner peace. Story. The young monk Kaito had traveled great distances to reach the mountain temple. His mind was filled with questions, and his heart was restless in the search for truth. Upon arriving, he found Master Ryo sitting under a cherry blossom tree. He bowed respectfully and said, "Master, I have come from far away to learn the way of Zen." The old man nodded without opening his eyes. Then, with a serene voice, he asked, "Do you hear the sound of the wind in the leaves?" Kaito listened attentively and replied, "Yes, Master." "And the sound of the river flowing below?" "I hear it too." Master Ryo opened his eyes and gazed at the young monk. "Tell me, Kaito, can you hear the sound of a single leaf falling?" Kaito frowned. He remained silent, waiting for the master to add something more. But the old man just smiled and closed his eyes again. Doubt settled in Kaito's mind. He knew the answer was not in words, but in experience. So he decided to stay at the temple until he found it. Days passed, and Kaito meditated in the stone garden, listening to every sound attentively. One morning, while sweeping fallen leaves, he saw a golden leaf detach from a branch and float in the air. He held his breath, trying to catch its sound, but all he heard was the whisper of the wind. He went to the master and said, "Master, I observed a leaf falling, but its sound was just that of the wind." Ryo nodded and asked, "Then is it the wind that falls and not the leaf?" Kaito hesitated. He had never thought of it that way. He returned to the garden, still pondering the question. One night, while the temple slept, Kaito sat under the same cherry blossom tree where he had first met the master. In the stillness of the night, his mind quieted. It was then that a leaf fell beside him. There was no noise, no wind, just the leaf descending into the vastness of the moment. And in that instant, Kaito felt something deeper than any sound. At dawn, Kaito returned to Master Ryo. He bowed deeply and said, "Master, I saw a leaf fall in the night. There was no wind, no sound. And yet, I felt something deeper than any noise." The master smiled slightly and asked, "Then did you hear the sound of a single leaf falling?" Kaito opened his mouth to respond, but stopped. Something in the master's question made him doubt. "I don't know, Master," he finally admitted. "That is a good beginning," said Ryo. "Now tell me, what sound does water have before it touches the earth?" Kaito frowned. He had heard the rain hitting stones, the stream flowing through rocks, the ocean crashing against the shore. But what about the water before it touched the earth? "I don't know," he repeated. The master nodded in satisfaction. "Then go and listen." Without further explanation, Ryo stood up and walked along the forest path. Kaito watched him leave and felt his restlessness grow. He didn't understand what the master wanted to teach him, but something within him urged him to continue seeking. He headed toward the river, where the water flowed in a constant murmur. He sat on the bank, closed his eyes, and began to listen. But how could he hear what had not yet happened? Kaito stayed by the river for hours. He heard the murmur of the water slipping over the stones, the echo of drops splashing against the current, the whisper of the breeze caressing the surface. But the sound of water before it touched the earth, it remained a mystery. Frustrated, he closed his eyes and tried to empty his mind, as the master had taught him. In that moment, something shifted. He stopped listening with his ears and began to perceive with his whole being. He felt the water rising as mist from the river. He felt the humidity suspended in the air, invisible but present. He felt the moment before the rain, when the sky holds its breath. And in that moment, he understood. The sound of water before it touches the earth is not a sound. It is a void, a pause, a moment of pure being. He immediately stood up and ran back to the temple. He found Master Ryo sweeping leaves in the garden and bowed to him. "Master," he said calmly, "I have understood." Ryo leaned his staff on the ground and looked at him with curiosity. "And what have you understood, Kaito?" The young monk smiled. "That the sound of water before it touches the earth is the same as the sound of a single leaf falling. The same as the sound of a single hand clapping." The master let out a soft laugh and nodded. "Very well, Kaito. Now tell me, what is the sound of your own existence?" Kaito felt a shiver run down his spine. He thought he had reached the end of his search, but the master had just opened a door even deeper. He bowed in respect and, without saying anything else, withdrew to search for the answer. Kaito spent the next days in deep silence. Each of Master Ryo's questions took him further from the answers his mind could formulate. What sound did his own existence have? He sat by the temple pond, watching the fish glide beneath the surface. They made no sound, and yet they were there. He watched the clouds moving across the sky, without sound, without effort, simply existing. Then he remembered his own breath. He focused on the air entering and leaving his body. It made no noise, or at least no perceptible one. But it was there, like an invisible river flowing through him. He understood that his existence didn't have a single sound, but many: the beating of his heart, the crunching of gravel beneath his feet, the murmur of his thoughts before they became words. That night, Kaito returned to the master and bowed before him. "Master, I believe I have found the answer." Ryo looked at him with interest. "Tell me." "My existence doesn't have one single sound, but many. It is the beat of my heart, the air I breathe, even the silence between my thoughts." The master nodded slowly. "You have listened well, Kaito. But tell me, if everything were to disappear, if the wind ceased to blow, if the water stopped flowing, if your body became still, what sound would remain?" Kaito felt his mind empty in an instant. He had no answer. The master smiled. "Go. Keep listening." Kaito bowed and left the temple, feeling that his search was just beginning. Kaito left the temple at dawn and walked into the deep forest. His mind was restless. He thought he understood the master's question, but every answer seemed to dissolve into the air. What sound would remain if everything disappeared? He climbed to the top of a hill and sat in meditation. He closed his eyes and let the world fade away. First, the wind disappeared. Then, the murmur of the trees. Next, the beat of his heart. His breath became so light that he could no longer distinguish it. His mind was in complete silence, and in that instant he felt it. It wasn't a sound like the others. It wasn't something that could be heard with ears. It was the vibration of the void, the presence that remained even when everything disappeared. It was the echo of silence itself. Kaito opened his eyes, amazed. For the first time, he understood that silence was not the absence of sound, but the essence behind everything that exists. When the sun began to set, he returned to the temple. He found Master Ryo sitting under the cherry blossom tree, waiting for him. He bowed deeply and said, "Master, now I understand. When everything disappears, what remains is not nothing, and at the same time it is everything." The master smiled with satisfaction. "You have listened to the sound of the void, Kaito. Now tell me, can you live in harmony with it?" Kaito felt a new question open before him, more vast than all the previous ones. "I don't know, Master." "Then stay and listen." The young monk nodded. His search had not ended, but now, for the first time, he felt that it was truly just beginning. Kaito stayed at the temple, but something in the way he perceived the world had changed. Before, he sought answers in sounds, in movements, in the words of Master Ryo. Now he found meaning in the silence between them. He began to notice things that he had previously overlooked. The space between the birds' songs, the pause between the river's waves, the still moment between inhaling and exhaling. The void no longer seemed like an absence but a constant presence. One day, while sweeping the leaves in the temple garden, Master Ryo approached and observed in silence. "Kaito," he finally said, "tell me, have you found harmony with the void?" Kaito stopped sweeping. He looked at his master and answered calmly, "I have learned to listen to it, but I don't know if I have learned to live with it." The master nodded. "Then go to the village. Live among the people. Listen to their words, their silences, their fears and joys. Only when you can hear the void amidst the noise will you truly understand." Kaito felt a sense of astonishment at the task. Since his arrival at the temple, he had learned to value stillness, but now the master was asking him to return to the hustle and bustle of the world. Nevertheless, he did not hesitate. He bowed in respect and, with only his few belongings slung over his shoulder, descended the mountain path toward the village. The true learning was about to begin. Kaito arrived at the village at dusk. It had been a long time since he had been among so many people. The voices of merchants, the clanging of hammers in the blacksmith's shop, the crying of a child, and the laughter of elders filled the air with incessant noise. He walked slowly, listening. He stopped in the plaza and observed a woman bargaining over the price of some fabrics. Her voice was firm, but there was a subtle pause before each phrase, as if she were uncertain. Further ahead, an old man was telling a story to a group of children. Between each word, the silence grew, as if the words themselves were shaped by the space around them, allowing the children to absorb every tale with undivided attention. Kaito noticed how the pauses between the old man's words seemed to hold more meaning than the words themselves. As he continued walking, Kaito observed the contrast between the noise of daily life and the silent moments between actions. He heard the market bustling with energy, yet he also felt the stillness in the pauses, the way the world seemed to breathe between each movement. That night, as he lay under the stars, Kaito meditated on the master's words. "Only when you can hear the void amidst the noise will you truly understand." The next day, Kaito decided to spend time with the villagers, listening deeply. He spoke to them, but always with attention to the silences between their words, to the emotions they conveyed in their pauses. He realized that life itself was a conversation between sound and silence, between the spoken and the unspoken. Over time, Kaito learned to navigate the noise of the world without losing touch with the inner silence he had discovered on the mountain. He learned that harmony was not about silencing the noise of the world but about finding peace within it, just as the quiet heart of the river continued to flow, regardless of the turbulence on the surface. Kaito returned to the temple years later, having learned the true meaning of Master Ryo's teachings. He had come to understand that the search for truth was not about answers but about listening to the moments of stillness in the midst of the world's noise. He had learned to live in harmony with the void and the silence, not as an absence but as a presence, and through that he had found true peace. Master Ryo greeted him with a knowing smile. "You have listened, Kaito, and you have learned to live in harmony with the sound of the void." Kaito nodded, humbled. He understood now that his search had not been for a specific answer, but for a deeper listening, one that embraced both the world's noise and its silence.